is it a winter wonderland there or no?
It is, yeah. Snow all over the place. So we had a day and a half snow days. We started back today at noon. Yeah, so
Okay.
quite different than my typical January in Charleston was.
Yeah, I was going to say. So tell me about that call. When you got the call to become the president of Liberty.
Yeah. It was unexpected. I wasn't looking for it. Wasn't really interested. Happy where we were, but one thing led to another, and I'm a two-time Liberty graduate.
Right.
I had a connection, and as an Air Force chaplain all those years, I was endorsed to the chaplaincy by Liberty Baptist Fellowship, which is part of the whole enterprise here. So had some sense of obligation, but Liberty changed my life. So yeah, but I like the beach too. So
yeah.
I was, but yeah, it took a few months, but we felt like this was the right place to be, and haven't been disappointed. Miss Charleston, miss our friends, miss the university, all that. But there's plenty here to love.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. And you named a few, but what's the biggest change from Charleston Southern to Liberty?
Yeah, the size and scope obviously are different, but you have a lot more help here, and so in the grand scheme, it's about the same. Some of it's small things that at Charleston Southern I could leave my desk, walk downstairs, walk 40 yards and be at the chow hall. And here it's a complicated venture with both my car and parking, all kinds of stuff. But those are probably the main things. Yeah, so you have a lot more help here. This place has money, and most schools don't. And so, that's been part of it here is they have resources to do things that you would love to have done. We'd love to have done, from whence I came, but just didn't have the money to do it. So those are the big things. When people used to ask me, what's the biggest change between the federal government and military all those years and higher education, I would say how much stuff costs. Because in the government you don't really worry about it. You ask for it, and you usually get it. And if you didn't get it, it was no big deal because you could find another way. Wait till next year, you probably get it next year. So it's
right
deal in this world, of course.
Well, and if you could, for the audience, can you just give a brief overview just of your distinguished career, your background, because I think your background and your background tied to the president of a post-secondary institution, it is a unique one.
Yeah. When I guess I'm part of that, whatever it is these days, 12, 15, maybe 20% now, the so-called non-traditional candidate. And so I was an industrial engineer in the Air Force, went to the Air Force Academy, industrial engineer in the Air Force, had a sense of calling to be an Air Force chaplain. Loved the Air Force, loved the Air Force people, and so became a chaplain after some education along the way. And as I said before, I had this connection to Liberty because Liberty University was on the front lines before there was an internet. Liberty University was on the front lines of providing accredited education that to your doorstep, and in my case it was accredited, so which meant the Air Force would pay for it. And so my first graduate degree my first two graduate degrees came from Liberty. One, by extension, kind of the precursor to Liberty University Online, and the second came because Uncle Sam and all his wisdom moved us from as newlyweds from Florida to Langley Air Force Base, Virginia, which I was in striking distance of Liberty to take residential classes, and so I was able to finish half of a Master of Divinity degree that way, and so that when I had my third Air Force assignment, it was close enough to a university that or to a seminary that I could finish up the Master of Divinity to become a chaplain. So industrial engineer for 10 years, was chaplain for 22, and then when it came time to to decide what was next, I made a list of all the things that I loved about the Air Force and being a senior leader in the Air Force Chaplain Corps. And I realized a number of things, two in particular. First thing is that for the most part, much of what a chaplain does in the Air Force is deal with the life challenges of 18 to 22-year-olds. And so there was an obvious bridge there to higher education, Christian higher education in my case. And the second thing is that if you were to take the organizational chart of any large military unit, you take that organizational chart and you overlay it onto the organizational chart for every university, you see an identical organizational chart. Both are complex bureaucracies with really good missions involving lots of different kinds of people, and so that's what attracted me. And so when I thought about all the things that I loved about my last few jobs in the Air Force, senior chaplain in the Middle East, for the Air Force, senior chaplain in the Pacific for the Air Force, and then Air Force chief of chaplains, leading teams to accomplish great things with a great mission, changing people's lives. Those are the things that I think were the transferable skills. And then organizationally, when I first got to my previous institution, again, which I said before, I dearly loved Charleston Southern. People would be talking to me, and I was brand new, and I would say, "Now, tell me what you do again." And they would tell me in English words what they did, and I said, "Oh, okay, in the Air Force, that's a this or that's a that." And then I would say, "I know what you're talking about now," and that's sort of how it went. But it's been a great transition, and I love higher education.
Well, I'd imagine, there's several advantages that you just outlined, an alum and your experience. What are those advantages like when you're talking to a prospective student or a prospective parent, about your experience?
Yeah, it is a game changer, because I get to say that Liberty University changed my life, changed the course of the trajectory of my career. Were it not for Liberty University, I would not be standing here today. Now, I don't know what he's going to do for you. I don't know what the Lord's going to do for you through Liberty, but I know what he did for me, and I know what he's done for hundreds of thousands of others. So that's the place from which I get to speak is to say, for the longest time, as I indicated earlier, Liberty was on the cutting edge of finding ways to deliver education, quality education, sort of on the cutting edge, innovative ways, all of that. And so that's what we still do. But had they not done that, I would never have become a chaplain. I would never have become the chief of chaplains, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's it is a game changer because I can tell my story in ways that I think other people can relate to.
Well, and I think Liberty University meets students where they are, but better than a lot of institutions. And so, can you talk about the evolution of Liberty since 1971 and how, you have that strong mix of on-campus students, but you obviously have a very large online population as well. You have roughly 97,000 students, about 49,000 undergrad. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you ask, but roughly speaking, I don't want anybody to accuse me of inflating numbers. Those who in the church world would understand. Sometimes we refer to evangelistically speaking, and so the pastor says, "Well, I'm sure there were 5,000 people here." Actually, I think I only saw 400. So roughly speaking, there's depending on how you do the math, 100 to 120,000 online, and then 15,500 on campus, including the medical school and the law school and all that. So, this isn't entirely the case, but it is largely the case that it sort of is, it's one mission, it's one, our tagline is training champions for Christ. But to some extent, it's two different schools. because it is appealing largely to two different student populations. And so you have the on-campus experience, which a traditional student wants the college experience and all of that, many of them do have to work, along the way as well. But many of them, come stay in the dorms and things like that, and do their college. And then you have, which is where I was for both of my degrees. Then you have the more adult population, not exclusively, but mostly so. The adult population that is trying to advance their careers, or trying to upskill, they're trying to get a degree because they need it for their for their profession, or they're trying to change careers, and they can't afford to drop everything and spend 2-3 years even getting a graduate degree. So I think to some extent it's two different schools, in the sense that we do a really good job of meeting the needs of the populations that we've been called to reach. And so I think, the reason that Liberty has been so successful all these years in doing that, and again, as I said before, I was in the other camp. I was in the camp that, had Liberty not been available, had Liberty not thought through the difficulties and the logistic challenges and the accreditation, because it was a new thing back in the mid '80s when they came up with this. If they'd not done that, and had they not been ready when I was ready, then again, I wouldn't be here today. My career would have taken a different path, and it would have been delayed probably a decade, frankly. And because of that, but because they were there and I was there and I was hungry for it, it certainly worked out for me. I look around the campus today, and in fact, I had lunch today along with some students. I had lunch today with some staff members who graduated 30 some years ago, and they're just in awe of all that God has done on this campus in terms of facilities and infrastructure and all that. So in 1971, when back to your original question, in 1971, when Dr. Falwell started the school, all he had was faith and a possible location. There was no money, but he had faith and he had vision, and it was his faith and his vision. When nobody else believed, he did, and as it turns out, that was enough. And so again, the same thing happened in mid '80s when they came up with the idea of doing extension learning, and then when the internet came online, Liberty University was an early adopter, and just applied those skills and abilities and experiences from before, into that forum. So that's sort of the story of Liberty, and but it's always done what we say we do now, and that is train champions for Christ.
Well, and I know one of Dr. Falwell's goals, especially when you look at the tagline "Train Champions for Christ," was to also make sure that you build a strong athletic program. Yeah. And can you talk about the evolution of Liberty and not just football, but all the other sports, and how has that impacted the school?
Yeah, again, I'll use the word again, and this time it's even more appropriate. It's been a game changer, because way back, Dr. Falwell said he was going to build this university. Obviously, strong academics, strong faith commitments, all of those things. But he said he was going to build this university really on two things: a commitment to athletics and a commitment to music. And so these are the things that speak to students, that serve as corollaries to the academic experience, and that's what he's done. So if you were to come to the campus, you would look around and you would see, certainly for a group of 5 institution, you probably would see, all things considered, the best athletic complex in the country. Now, there might be a group of 5 school that has a better this stadium or that stadium, but if you come and look at the indoor track and the natatorium, and the football stadium and the basketball arena and all of that, the lacrosse field, the field, all these things together, the golf facility, what you would see is that Dr. Falwell's vision, has come to reality. And if I could take you and walk you through the School of Music building, you'd see commercial music facilities, and you'd see this phenomenal, School of Music auditorium, the whole thing. And so I think what we see is that when it comes to athletics, this year, as you probably know, Liberty was 13-0 in the regular season, and was the one Group of Five team, the highest ranking Group of Five team in the college football playoff, that was selected to go play in a New Year's Six bowl. And so you can't. That's the kind of marketing and branding that there are a few other ways to do it. And so fortunately, that's what we do. And interesting, over the summer, I read Dr. Falwell's autobiography, and at the end of the book, and about page 435 or so, the end of the book, he includes this list of 10 things that was sort of the vision of the school, and he mentioned specifically that we're going to have a commitment to athletics, and then he puts a comma and he says including football, period. And so football is the one. He was a big football fan. He'd been a Green Bay Packers fan, and the story goes, I've heard it from very reliable sources, that the original colors of Liberty, which are now like red, white, and blue, the original colors were green and gold because he was a Green Bay Packers fan. And so I think you see Dr. Falwell's vision sort of played out in every area here.
So what's the biggest challenge just from a competition standpoint? Because the competition in general in higher ed is, many would say, saturated. Private faith-based institution, again, it's tough to compete. So what is your biggest challenge as far as continued growth for the institution?
Yeah, it is tough sledding out there. I don't need to tell certainly your audience all the challenges that higher education faces, but there are political challenges, and there are questions about value. There are questions about is college worth it? All of these things, and in the meantime, there's this shrinking pool of students who are even able to go to college, much less want to go to college, and so that's kind of the marketplace that we find ourselves. And I think the advantage that Liberty would have is we've talked about this already, but its online presence also provides a kind of larger branding that some other schools wouldn't have access to. But every day is a fight, and anybody who would say, I've been at a smaller school where you fight for every penny, and you fight for every student, and I think the same is true across higher education, and it's true here. We want to make sure that we are providing and making plain the value proposition that Liberty University is putting forth in a way that is appealing to students. And for the most part, if a student visits the campus of Liberty University, there's a good chance you're going to come here because you may have heard about the campus, you may have, but until you show up here and see it, and see the scope and the facilities and meet the faculty and all of that, like twice a week we have 8 or 9 or 10,000 students gathering for a worship service on the campus. That's mandatory. Some of the country's best speakers come, and then on Wednesday nights we have a voluntary worship service that's an hour and a half long, with some of the best music you'll ever hear, and a 40-minute message from a preacher. Last semester, we averaged over 5,000 students every Wednesday night, for the entire semester. So I think, just being on the campus and experiencing the spiritual fervor, and seeing what Liberty's all about, and getting a taste of athletics, all of that makes for a great college experience. And so the same thing was true at my previous institution. If you come and see the campus, meet the people, that makes all the difference. And the same is true here.
So how do you make sure that you're incorporating your faith-based mission for all students? whether it be on campus or online.
Yeah, yeah, it's that's the coin of the realm for us. That we say we're training champions for Christ, and so I ask often, how do we know that we're doing that? And so on campus, it looks a little different than off campus, or for those who are going online. But in every classroom, every professor is committed to the biblical worldview. Every professor understands, what we would say all truth is God's truth, and they teach it differently through their discipline, but they integrate their faith in the classroom in a way that shows the student that again, whatever the discipline is, that discipline is evidence that God is real and is who He says He is, and so each professor that applies that concept to the critical thinking skills and the communication abilities and the problem solving abilities and all the rest for a student. So we spend a lot of time and effort making sure our faculty are prepared for that, and we're in the process now of completing a strategic plan, and that's a fundamental element of it, because for us, if we lose the faith element, if we lose the fact that we really are training champions for Christ, then that's our value proposition. And let's face it, not every student who comes to Liberty is a Christian, when they show up, but most are, and most come expecting that we are going to be doing the things that we say we're going to be doing, and so for us, it's not just this obligation that we have, but it's also an expectation. Fortunately for us, the two things mesh up pretty well. We are happy to have the obligation, and we are happy to fulfill the expectation.
So, how do you define student success?
Yeah, when I as a relative newcomer to higher education still. When I got to Charleston Southern, my first institution, you've probably heard it said that you have to answer two questions, whatever business you're in. The questions are, what business are we in, and how's business? And so the question that for a higher education institution that I quickly learned was that student success is what we do. Clearly we're here for students to be successful. We're not here just so they can go to a football game, just so they can do this, just so they can do that. And so when I look at and I frame student success, I look at three things. I look at first of all enrollment, because I think that if a student has the chance to be engaged, whether online or on campus, that I think they should come here or a school a lot like us rather than some other school. And so I think they'll be more successful in this kind of environment where we focus on character and all the things. So enrollment is first, and we pay close attention to that. And the second thing is retention. How do we make sure that we are providing the kind of education in the kind of way that is going to encourage a student to stay and retain, so that they can finish their academic degree and then go on and live a productive life. And the third thing, which is clearly related to the second, is graduation rates. And so we focus on those. And again, Liberty University is certainly among the best at student success, in early alerts and faculty-student relationships. All of those things we pay very close attention, as everybody in higher education certainly attempts to do. We pay very close attention. We have really good technologists here. We have lots of systems, some of which that we have produced ourselves, and others that supplement that. But so those three things are kind of how I frame the problem. Beyond that, it's and again, part of our strategic plan is building into every element of the curriculum. How do we define and how do we measure what it means to be a champion for Christ? And so that's what we're looking into as well as in terms of our strategic plan.
Well, and I think Liberty University is in a a pretty distinctive position as it relates to career paths and making certain that students, have a clear career path, but can continue to elevate in their career, change positions if they need to, because we know in 5 or 10 years and beyond, there's going to be jobs out there that don't exist today,
Right.
and also vice versa. So, can you talk about how you're educating that traditional age student, right, that 24-year-old and younger, but then also the non-traditional student that might need a degree or maybe needs a certificate to advance in their career, that 24-year-old and
Yeah,
older crowd?
yeah, that's right. And so, part of what keeps us sort of on the forefront is, again, we're really good at analytics. We're really good at keeping in touch with the marketplace. What are the needs that the market is demanding, and are we producing students who are going to fill those market demands? We offer hundreds upon hundreds of options for students that would sort of span the gamut here, the whole spectrum of education. But we're really good at making sure that we're not just holding on to things of the past just because we've always done it that way. We're forward leaning and forward looking, and I think those two things have helped keep Liberty really at the front edge of higher ed. And so it's a daily process. We have analytics that are up to the minute, and just trying to make sure that we're serving our students in the way that they need to be served and want to be served. And we do it both online and residentially. Especially for an adult student or a student who is beyond traditional age, they tend to be very good at knowing what they want and what they need. That's why they come to us. It's not always as much for a traditional undergraduate, because most of us showed up at 18 not having a clue what we wanted to do. But part of the college experience, I think, is helping that group settle on that first thing. And I tell students all the time, say, listen, no, you have no idea where you're going to be 10 years from now. I mean, if you're going to be a nurse or an engineer, you're going to be stuck in that because it'll be maybe you think it's too hard, you got too much invested. But most of us, I was part of that. I mean, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I landed on a major the last week that I was allowed to land on a major in my sophomore year. So right before spring break in my sophomore year. So, one of the messages I give to students, the first message is college is harder than high school. The second message is, don't worry about it too much. You just absorb, enjoy the academic experience, understand that it is an academic experience primarily. Here, there's a faith element and all that, but you are learning skills in these 4 years that are going to serve you well for the rest of your life. We want you to be a critical thinker and a problem solver. We want you to be able to articulate yourself, speak well and write well in a persuasive way. We want you to be a resilient person. We want you to understand that, at least in your generation, for a traditional age student today, mental health is far more of a challenge than it was when I was in college. And there are plenty of reasons for that, but still, we have our student population, all of us are going to have to deal with these mental health challenges. And so we want to make sure that we have given you the skills and the abilities, and much of that comes from your faith, that when you get to your first job, you have the resilience to succeed. You know what it means to fail and pull yourself back up again and all of that. And so those are the things that I say. We are really teaching you how to succeed in your first job, and you and the Lord will figure out succeeding jobs. And so I was an industrial engineer because that was the major I picked as a 19-year-old that would require of me to write the fewest number of papers. That was my logic. Then I became a chaplain. And it was a chaplain in the Air Force for 22 years after having been a 4 years as a college professor teaching ROTC in between. And then I jumped into higher education. None of that from the outside seems to fit, but I can tell exactly how each of it fits together. And how the skills I learned early on and throughout the process all kind of bear upon my daily work today.
Well, now are students able to get internships as early as freshman year? I mean, how soon can they start working with
Yeah,
businesses?
certainly. They, I'll give an example. I attended the freshman engineering orientation. It was an ice cream party back in August, and part of the message from the dean was the importance of internships and getting one as early as possible.
Hmm.
And he explained in great detail how, the sooner you start, the sooner you get work experience, the sooner you get your name known, especially if you're doing an internship as an engineer, because you can demonstrate your ability and you probably have a job before you graduate. And so, it is certainly possible and expected in many of these majors, and some are more challenging than others, but yeah, we encourage it strongly, and it might be the best thing, extracurricular thing that you do as a student is get an internship of some sort.
Well, because I know, I mean, my oldest, my son, who's a freshman in high school, he's already starting to ask me about, well, hey, I think I like finance. Hey, I think I like computer science. But he's already starting to connect the dots and realizing, okay, but what job can I get?
Yeah.
What can I do with this? And I said, well, you can do a lot, but I think that's where those internships really come in handy, among other things.
Yeah, and I think I don't know about what it was like when you were a freshman in high school, but I didn't have a lot of my friends, and I certainly wasn't going, man, I should do some internships. I should get some work experience in high school so I can figure
Not
out.
me.
No, I can't tell you anybody who did that. And I think part of it is it now is in the ether. It's in the conversation. Part of the national conversation is from politicians and in all the higher ed world is hey, we got to make sure to the best of our ability that we're preparing students for the actual workforce. And so there's always been this tension, between what's the value of a liberal arts education, versus, well, what kind of job are you going to get? Well, they should never have really been in conflict. But, given the conversation that's happening nationally, I think earlier and earlier, students are going to be asking because their parents are going to be talking about it, which means that universities and colleges and, two-year schools and trade schools are also going to have to be ready for that. And I think in many respects, leading the conversation and demonstrating to prospective students that, hey, man, we got you. Here's the path. And we're going to help you get from point A to point B as best we can.
Now, has it been, and easier may not be the best word, but just from an international recruitment standpoint, do you feel like you've been stronger over the past few years, especially since COVID? Have things changed? What does that international landscape look like?
Yeah, I think we're starting to see a rebound. I think both at my previous institution and here, there was never really a drop off. There was always sort of a building of momentum, but I think it'll be even more and more and more. And I'm glad COVID's gone. I hope it never comes back. It was bad. It was a bad thing for all of us. So I think we're far enough past it now that really isn't a factor. But one of the great values, and I said this at Charleston Southern often, and I said this to our new class of international students here back in the early fall. I said, not only is, we hope, an American university, this one, Liberty University, good for you, I explained to them the value that they bring to the classroom, because some of our students, may have never left the state that they were raised in, and maybe to go to Disney World, but other than that, in church world, maybe a couple of mission trips here and there. But for the most part, having an international student in the classroom, yeah, it's good for the international student, but it's really good for our students, our domestic students, because they get to travel the world by just attending classes here and seeing the different cultures and how different cultures think, and the importance of diversity of thought and what diversity of culture brings to a campus and a community and a problem solving exercise. And so, yeah, I hope more and more come, and certainly we're doing our part to try to make that happen.
Do you spend a lot of time managing publicity?
Yes, yes. Some challenges are bigger than others, but fortunately, we have a pretty active marketing and communication arm, and they stay on top of things. But yeah, it's a thing. And again, back in the day when I was going to college, even before when I was thinking about it, there might be something. It might be an article in the paper, and it would be there for a day and it'd be gone. And then maybe if it was big enough, it'd be mentioned on a newscast, but you wouldn't hear about it again. Of course, today, anything that happens is something that goes global in nanoseconds. And so it's just a different world. And so we do, put a lot of attention to making sure that truth is told, for one thing. But also that the brand of our university is well represented and as need be protected.
So where do you see Liberty University in 10 years?
Yeah, we are asking that very question right now, and so I had the great privilege of showing up and did some preliminary strategic planning, with all of our deans. All of our vice presidents, and as a prelude to an extensive strategic planning process that we're probably 3/4 of the way done with now. And so the way I frame the question is, or frame the challenge is, a leader's job, among other things, is to rally the troops and say, hey, let's take that hill. And so the most important thing to determine, though, is which hill are we taking. And so if you don't have one, if you don't have a hill that you're taking, then everybody just sort of does their own thing, and you hope for the best. Well, in this process, we are asking some very pointed questions. Things like any university should be asking. In our case, it's to what extent we are a teaching institution and always will be. But to what extent should we also be a research institution? That's a philosophical question. It's an infrastructure question. It's all kinds of things. But we're asking that question. We're asking the question: how large should Liberty University be, both online and on campus? Because online's a little easier, but on campus, as you well know, if you say you're going to go from 15,500 to 20,000, let's say, it's not just a recruiting effort, and so what would you do if all 20,000 showed up? Where would they live? Where would they eat? Is our road infrastructure big enough to handle all these students? And we do want to come, and we'd love to be 50,000. And so it's incrementally, how do we determine how large we should get, how quickly we should get there, and just making sure we're doing it for the right reasons, not just, we want to be big. And so on the one hand, we are saying that every student in America should have the opportunity to have a Liberty University education. I believe that. I think every student in America would love it here. On the other hand, if every student in America showed up, I don't know where we put them, where would we house them, all that sort of thing. So we're doing this in a responsible way to make sure that we're growing in a way that is going to not diminish the student experience of those students who are already here. And so that's the big question. Those are the two big questions that we're asking. We are also asking the question, how large should your endowment be? For us, frankly, it's a question of, if the winds were to change And a faith-based education, a Christian education, was suddenly on the outs. To the extent that no government, no government funding or scholarship money, grants, et cetera, could be used here, what would we do? And so, that's part of our long-term conversation is you don't have a big endowment just to have a big endowment so you can brag to your buddies. Who cares about that? You have an endowment so that if funding sources were to go away, and in our case, there's a serious concern in the next generation, if not sooner, that Christian schools would maybe be institutions non grata, if I can use that phrase. We want to prepare so that if that were to happen, we'd still be able to allow plenty of students to have the kind of education that the university provides. So those are the kind of the big rocks that we're dealing with, and then probably in 3-4 months we'll have a plan, and I will then be able to stand in front of people and say, okay, let's take the hill, and here's the hill.
Well, excellent. Well, President Dondi, Costin, hey, thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Good seeing you, Brad. Have a great afternoon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the College Admission TV Presidential Podcast. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we'll bring you another insightful conversation with a distinguished leader in higher education.